you shortly.
Oh, I tell you, hey, on second thought, I don't think I'm going to be seeing her today.
You're leaving?
Oh, I'm getting the hell out of here. You tell her, though, I really appreciate her wanting to see me, and maybe I'll call on her again when I have a little bit more karma in the bank.
We've fooled them for years. No one has ever been able to tell us apart. Only our girlfriends know for sure. We walk alike, talk alike, even eat the same kind of chips. Like these bite-sized Doritos. We can crunch them twice as fast and get a double shot of flavor. Now, Floyd likes the nacho cheese flavor, and Lloyd likes the Cool Ranch. Or is it the other way around?
New bite-sized Doritos tortilla chips in the twin pack. Now the crunches come in bunches.
Tonight on Nightline. It's important to hear from people who have experience in world affairs. A conversation with Richard Nixon on Nightline tonight.
Hey, Des Moines, you need hard water zest.
Hard to get clean in hard water, and you're in a hard water town. Clean with hard water zest, and you'll know what we mean. You're not fully clean unless your zest fully clean.
Hard water zest was made for hard water. Soap leaves a film behind, but zest rinses clean. No film on your skin.
No ring in your toe.
You're not fully clean unless your zest fully clean.
Arby's is the place for different, like our big French dip or triple cheese melt. Get the French dip with loads of freshly sliced roast beef and a cup of hot au jus, or the triple cheese melt with Swiss, cheddar, and Parmesan cheese sauce. So if you're tired of...
Arby's is different.
Hey, different is good.
This is Joan London.
And Charles Gibson. Tomorrow, shaping up your family finances. Also, what Americans spend $6 billion a year on, landscaping the yard.
Plus Christian Slater tomorrow on Good Morning America.
To provide weather you can count on. Only Channel 5 has 3 meteorologists with the training to accurately track storms. Only Channel 5 gives you weather updates on the hour, every hour. Only Channel 5 guarantees you a weather forecast in the first 5 minutes of every newscast we do. And only Channel 5 can keep you safe with the Guardian Lightning Tracking System. When you need to know the weather, turn to Channel 5. Weather you can count on. Channel 5's Gale Nye, keeping you in touch.
Richard Nixon on Saddam Hussein. If we have good evidence, hard evidence, that he is going forward with chemical or nuclear or any other kind of weapons, no doubt we should go in after a warning and bomb him. On the Kuwaiti royal family. To fight a war, to put back on the throne a regime that denies civil rights, that doesn't even make any attempt to move toward democracy, is something that most Americans are repelled by. On Mario Cuomo and the Democrats. I think he would have been better advised probably to run, because of all the others, I would say, are either lightweights or at best middleweights. On David Duke. He could get 3 to 4 to 5%. And in close states like California, Illinois, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, in close states, that could make a difference. A conversation with Richard Nixon tonight.
This is an ABC News Nightline special edition. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
In his latest book, Seize the Moment, Richard Nixon writes with some considerable relish of his meeting with Nikita Khrushchev in Moscow during the summer of 1959. Khrushchev arrogantly predicted to me, writes Nixon, your grandchildren will live under communism. I responded, your grandchildren will live in freedom. At the time, Nixon now concedes, I was sure he was wrong,
but I was not sure I was right. As a result of the new Soviet Revolution, I proved to be right. Khrushchev's grandchildren now live in freedom. Richard Nixon has lived long enough to see communism reduced to a mere fraction of what it once was. He has outlived many, if not most, of his political adversaries at home and abroad. What he will never outlive is the scandal of the Watergate cover-up. In the minds of some, that disqualifies him from the honorific rank of elder statesman, if not from appearing in public altogether. Be that as it may, and it's the first question I raised with him earlier today, in our view, Richard Nixon is an interesting man whose experience still deserves to be tapped, whose views are still worth hearing. When we come back, a conversation with Richard Nixon.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Ralston Purina Company.
If you buy dry dog food, there's something you should know. They're pretty much the same. Right, Jake? Most of them start with ground corn as the #1 ingredient, even a fancy brand like Science Diet. But Purina One Dog formula is different because it starts with chicken. Chicken, corn, wheat, and other wholesome ingredients provide high-quality nutrition and a naturally good taste dogs love. To me, Purina One is the only one.
Purina One, second to none.
First Contact wrote the book on cold medicine. And now a new chapter, Contact Day and Night. Day caplets for non-drowsy cold relief. Night caplets to relieve your symptoms to let you rest. New Contact Day and Night, a whole new chapter in cold relief.
This is the new Maytag Jet Clean dishwasher with 47 powerful jets that scrub from the top, bottom, and sides. It's made to do the dishes with little help from you. Or me. Maytag, the dependability people.
No matter how good you feel, you can still benefit from whole grain nutrition. But of these leading cereals, only Wheaties is made with 100% whole grain. So no matter what you're shooting for, better get your whole grain.
I bet eat my Wheaties.
It's us and them. Every motorist's nightmare, sliding under a monster truck. For 20 years, these accidents didn't have to happen. Primetime tells why Thursday.
Mr. President, let me start off by hitting you with a tough one, and then we're going to get into some of the deeper thinking of what you have done on foreign policy and domestic policy also. Anytime you appear since 1974, there is always a chorus of criticism that says, why are you putting that man on television? He disgraced the office of the presidency, shouldn't be there, you shouldn't be listening to what he has to say. Now, I present you with that so you can respond to it directly. Why should you be on television? Why should you still be writing books?
Well, I wouldn't be on television and I wouldn't be writing books unless I felt I had something to say that I didn't feel anyone else was saying or saying it adequately. And as far as people who put me on or people who listen, they must feel that that is the situation too. They must agree with that. And that's why I go on. In fact, it isn't a question, am I asking to go on, as you know.
No, indeed. We've been after you for a long time to come on.
I've been on a couple of times with you before.
Indeed.
Once from China.
Right. But I mean, the question seems to be that somehow you disqualified yourself. It's not a question. The criticism seems to be that somehow you have disqualified yourself from being the elder statesman.
Well, I understand the criticism, but I also understand that in today's world, it's important to hear from people who have experience in world affairs and who have something to say that needs to be said. And in my last book, Seize the Moment, I try to do that. And I think it's very important that I do continue to do that. It would be easy for me to do like many other former officials, to spend my time relaxing, playing golf, playing bridge, and that sort of thing. But as far as I'm concerned, when I have so little time left, I want to use every minute of it sharing my views to the extent that they are useful with others. Whether they disagree with them or not, I think it's important now that we hear all the views we can possibly get so that we make the right decision.
As you look around you now, as you look at this new presidential campaign coming up, you and I met a few weeks ago, and you had some interesting observations to make for example, about the impact of a fellow named David Duke. Now, since that time, there's been another fellow by the name of Pat Buchanan, who used to work for you, who has also thrown his hat into the ring. Give us your analysis of what the Duke factor will be, and then if you think it's going to be a totally separate thing, what the Buchanan factor will be.
Well, the two are very different people to begin with. They are both conservatives, or at least they claim to be conservatives. There's no question that Pat Buchanan is a true believing conservative. I don't know David Duke, but from what I read about him, he is out of the mainstream. He's not a Democrat, he's not a Republican, and I understand why some of the Republican chairmen don't even want him on the ballot. As a matter of fact, I think Massachusetts probably was correct in putting him on the ballot, because it's best to knock him out running for the Republican nomination than to have him run as an independent. If he runs as an independent, he would siphon votes off, potentially, from our presidential candidate. Now let's look at Buchanan. I know him very well because, as you know, we've worked together for over 20 years. He is a passionate, true believing conservative. He is not a nut. He's not a racist. He's not anti-Semitic. He is very pro-American, and that makes him appear to be anti-others, anti-other countries. But it's more that he is pro-American. I would say that he's a man who feels so strongly that he'd rather be right than be president. And that's probably what's going to happen to him. On the other hand, in a state like New Hampshire, which is in recession, Buchanan will get over 40% of the vote. He will also make an impression in some of the other primaries. He will lose, and at the convention, he'll make a fine speech supporting President Bush, because he will realize that the choice is not between President Bush and somebody better, but between President Bush and somebody much worse. And Buchanan will support him and be a very effective supporter.
So what's the point? I mean, why go through the agony of these months? Is it just for that moment of glory then in New Hampshire where you can say, I got 40% against an incumbent president?
No, Pat doesn't work that way. He believes in his conservative principles. He doesn't think the current administration represents those principles adequately. He believes that if he gets out there and campaigns for those principles, they will have to listen to him, and that he may be able to affect the platform and possibly the course of events in the next administration. That's why he's in it. And I think under those circumstances, you really can't criticize him for trying. But in the end, there's no question that he will be supporting the Bush-Quayle ticket enthusiastically, because the choice will be something that he really cannot accept.
Go back, if you would, for a moment to an analysis that you gave me a few weeks ago about David Duke, and you drew the analogy between 1988. You made the observation that even though it looked as though Bush defeated Dukakis in a landslide, it was only an electoral landslide. It wasn't a landslide in the popular vote. And how you think the Duke candidacy might have an impact there.
Well, the Duke candidacy could have somewhat the same effect that the Wallace candidacy had on me in 1968. Wallace got about 10 to 12% of the vote. But polls indicated, because he was a conservative, that about 2 out of the 3 votes he got came from me rather than from Hubert Humphrey. It therefore made a race which otherwise would have been a small landslide. It made it very, very close. Now, in the case of Duke, he's not going to get, if he runs as an independent, 10 to 12%. He could get 3 to 4 to 5%. And in close states like California, Illinois, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, in close states, that could make a difference. Therefore, it's very important that Duke be knocked out early on. We don't want any part of him as far as accepting the fact that he is a Republican, because he isn't. He isn't a Republican. He isn't a Democrat. He's just for Duke. That's all.
Let's talk about a Democrat who almost did, and I gather that you have been in touch with Mario Cuomo, even since he decided not to run. Why do you think he made that decision?
I expected him to run, but I think he looked at the situation in his own state. He felt that unless he could handle the budget problem there, that would be a liability which would run the risk of his not being able to run a good race for the presidency. Cuomo doesn't want to lose. We must remember that before he had his victories for governor on 2 occasions, that he had lost a couple of times. He doesn't want to lose again. I think he probably decided that, well, he's still young enough, he can make it next time. And so I think he'll be in the ring in '96. I think he would have been better advised probably to run. because of all of the Democratic candidates, he's the only heavyweight. The others, I would say, are either lightweights or at best middleweights, at least at this time. I would add, however, in effect, that will change. Once one of the Democrats is nominated, then he can get a very great lift from media steroids, because they will give him the lift and they can make a lightweight a heavyweight virtually overnight. So I think the Democratic nominee, whoever it is, in this period, assuming that the recession is still on, will run a good race, but Bush will win.
When you say assuming the recession is still on, let me pin you down on that one a little bit. You think the recession is still going to be on? Obviously, the president's going to do everything he possibly can, even if it's done with smoke and mirrors, to at least give the impression that the recession is over. Am I inferring too much if I infer that you don't think that's going to happen?
No, I think the recession should be over, or at least a recovery should begin. Not a very strong recovery, but enough of a recovery so that the recession is not the issue that it is today. I think that should begin in the summer.
But even if the recession continues in a somewhat diminished form, you still think that President Bush is strong enough to beat any of the Democrats out there right now?
I do. It will be a close race, but he will win. He will win by winning all of the South. He will win all the South, incidentally, except for possibly a few border states, even if Clinton is nominated. And then he will pick up, in addition, some heartland states, Illinois and Ohio. California is going to be very tough for him. New York, Pennsylvania, these states will be very tough for him. But I see him winning due to, incidentally, something he's criticized for, that he's the only candidate in the field who is really a heavyweight. He's the only candidate in the field who knows foreign policy. Now, I know that all the polls show that people don't care about foreign policy, but they will. And President Bush should campaign on foreign and domestic policy, because he will demolish any of the Democratic opponents, all of whom are amateurs in foreign policy. They know very little about it, and most of them, what they do know is wrong.
All right, let's take a short break. We'll be back with former President Nixon in just a moment.
Recently, DuPont announced that its energy unit Conoco would pioneer the use of new double-hold oil tankers in order to safeguard the environment. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. DuPont, better things for better living.
The guy in the new Infiniti just discovered something about his car and about himself. He just discovered that the 18-year-old adventurer who loved to drive never left. Seems he's just been snoozing for the last, 20 years. And his new Q45 just woke him up. Without acne. Infiniti makes you want to take up driving again, doesn't it?
To me, Taekwondo is not just a part-time thing. It's a way of life for me. It's my full-time job, and I put as much into it as I can. I teach all the classes, and I see to it that every class I give a speech on some type of moral or value, so the children, especially in the class, can get something out of that, learn how to be honest, not stealing, and not taking drugs and alcohol and that type of thing. So we stress the morals and value a lot, I think, probably more than a lot of the other clubs.
Right now, two can join for the price of one at Farrell's Taekwondo.
She knows he's out there, obsessed with her every move. Victims of stalkers, living in fear of when they'll strike next. Watch 2020 Friday.
Tomorrow, the future of feminism. Also, Imelda Marcos's run for the Philippine presidency.
Plus the growing business of landscaping, and Kristen Slater on Good Morning America tomorrow.
Back once again with former President Richard Nixon. Even as we speak, President Bush is in Japan. And there is sort of a sense, even though I think the president is doing what he can to tamp it down a little bit, there's a sense that he's over there with all these heavyweight businessmen to engage in a little bit of arm twisting. You don't think that's necessarily the smartest thing to do you?
Well, I feel it's very important to keep the whole Japanese-American relationship in perspective. Now, let's just look at the two countries, what the stakes are. In the first place, between the two of us, Japan and the United States, with 8% of the people in the world, produce 40% of the world's wealth. If the two of us can work together, we can affect the course of events of the whole world for the next 10 years into the next century. It's very important that we recognize that we have common interests. We have common interests in another respect. We are both democracies. We are both for the free market. We are both committed to peace. We don't have designs on the other territorially or any other way. Having all those things in mind, we have to recognize that because we are the two strongest economies in the world, we're going to be competitive. We're going to have differences.
Was the president well advised, do you think, to take these business leaders along with him? I mean, it does look as though they've gone over to engage in a little Japan bashing.
I can't be critical of the president on that because he had to look at what the situation was insofar as his domestic policies were concerned, the criticism he was getting for spending all of this time in foreign policy and not enough on domestic policy, his concern about the recession. Whether he was right or not will depend upon what happens when he comes back, whether the polls go up or the polls go down.
You mean politically?
Politically,
right
we're speaking of politically.
But I'm asking you, as a foreign policy decision, was it, I mean, you know how sensitive the Japanese are to things like that. Should we care about how sensitive they are?
I think as far as the Japanese are concerned, as the Prime Minister indicated, they're aware of the fact that they've had a virtual free ride in the foreign policy area because of the U.S. commitment. And they expect some bashing. I think it's a mistake, however. I think Japan bashing on the part of the United States is a mistake. I think American bashing on the part of some Japanese, which, as you know, is developing at the present time, is a mistake. I think, too, that as far as our policy is concerned, we have to get some things straight. Let me demolish some of the myths. One, the myth that the Japanese policies on trade and so forth have caused the recession. That's not true. We would have had a recession whether we'd had any differences with Japan or not. The idea that Japan is now going to own most of America, there's no basis for that. They have a very strong economy. We have a very strong economy. I'd make another point, too, that when we talk about trade, I've looked at the numbers there a bit. If all of the non-tariff barriers, which are wrong, the Japanese have, if all of their other trade restrictions, which are wrong, particularly, for example, on rice, etc., if we got rid of all of them, as far as the trade deficit is concerned, which is about $60 billion a year, it would amount to only $8 to $10 billion a year in working on off that deficit. We have to look, in other words, to ourselves rather than just to the Japanese. We've got to bargain with them to get rid of their restrictions, but we got to get rid of some of ours as well. We're going to be better served by a policy of free and fair trade than one of trying to protect against each other.
I want to take another brief break, and when we come back, some of the views that you have about the Middle East, most particularly what we should be doing about Iraq. More on that when we come back in a moment.
If you're looking for a great vacation, I've got just the place.
In the morning, in the evening, ain't we got fun? Not much money, oh, but honey, ain't we got fun? The food is great here, there's never a bill. Well, stay up late, dear, let's not miss a trip.
Take a 3, 4, or 7-day fun-ship vacation on Carnival, the most popular cruise line in the world.
Today, Tex-Red Shoe Corporation announced a major retail expansion in 25 U.S. cities.
When I see a company that looks like a good investment, I check it out myself.
We make it easier to follow your own lead.
At Charles Schwab, I can get quotes, financial news, and when I make a trade, commission savings.
Always there to give you just the help you need.
Help yourself at Schwab today.
These slip down one more time. I'm fed up with glasses that don't fit.
You don't have to put up with glasses that don't fit anymore. Because at LensCrafters, we have so many new ways to make glasses more comfortable.
LensCrafters glasses fit your snug points with features like new snug fit hinges that hug your head and won't lose their gentle hold. LensCrafters, for that cushion of comfort you've always wanted.
I never knew glasses could be this comfortable.
LensCrafters, better fit for greater comfort in about an hour.
You'd rather walk than drive an American car.
You think no American car can match the quality of an import. You figure if it isn't foreign, it isn't for you. You wouldn't give an American car the time of day. Well, in case you haven't noticed, times have changed. Introducing the new Skylark. This is the Buick that's going to change a lot of impressions about Buick.
Channel 5 is uniquely qualified to provide weather you can count on. Only Channel 5 has 3 meteorologists with the training to accurately track storms. Only Channel 5 gives you weather updates on the hour, every hour. Only Channel 5 guarantees you a weather forecast in the first 5 minutes of every newscast we do. And only Channel 5 can keep you safe with the Guardian Lightning Tracking System. When you need to know the weather, turn to Channel 5. Weather you can count on.
And we're back once again with former President Richard Nixon. I said before the break, Mr. President, that I was a little surprised when I read your book and I read what was really a critical observation on your part of both the Bush and the Reagan administrations for having dealt with the Iranians, for having dealt with the Iraqis, for having sold as many weapons to the Iraqis as they did, for having engaged in an arms for hostages deal with the Iranians. You were pretty tough.
Well, I guess I can be pretty tough because I don't have to make the decisions. And I am sure that both of them had facts that were made available to them that may not have been made available to me. But I believe that my analysis is an honest one. I think it's a fair one. And I think in retrospect that both of them might reach the same conclusion.
That it was just not a smart thing to do, in either case.
Well, let's first look at the situation of helping Iraq during the Iraq-Iran war. We had to balance the situation there, and so that perhaps is a justification for that. As far as Iran is concerned, the idea that we're going to find some people in Iran who are going to be moderates is just pure nonsense. Here's a country that is engaged in over 400 terrorist incidents, and incidentally, it's still a terrorist state. There's no question about that.
You find that it's a little bit demeaning for the United States to be, in effect, thanking and congratulating both the Iranians and the Syrians for helping in the release of hostages when they were directly or indirectly responsible for the taking of those hostages in the first place.
Absolutely. You don't thank a kidnapper for returning the individual that he's kidnapped, particularly after you paid him off to an extent. No, I think that as far as that is concerned, they deserve no brownie points at all for returning hostages that they shouldn't have taken in the first place.
One more interesting footnote about Iraq, and it's sort of buried in your book, and yet you're saying if we can't find, or if Saddam Hussein is not totally cooperative in letting those UN inspection teams go in, that we ought to bomb a few of those facilities. I was surprised to read that.
No doubt about it. We have to understand that there's been some criticism of President Bush for not going further, for not continuing the war for a couple of more days and taking out Saddam Hussein and have him die in a bunker as Hitler had, since he compared him with Hitler. I understand why he didn't. The reason that he didn't is that he had at the outset enlisted the Congress and also enlisted the Allies for one purpose, and that was to get Iraq out of Kuwait. Once that was accomplished, the concept of a just war would not allow him to carry the war further. But now, at this time, in the event that Saddam Hussein stiffs the UN, doesn't allow inspection, and if we have good evidence, hard evidence, that he is going forward with chemical or nuclear or any other kind of weapons, no doubt we should go in after a warning and bomb him.
You were not all that easy on the Kuwaitis in your book either, on the Kuwaiti royal family.
I would say that I find it really revolting that the Kuwaiti royal family, after all of the money that has been spent and the lives that have been lost in order to save their country, that they have made no progress whatever that I can see insofar as political reform is concerned. The American people are very idealistic. We fight our wars, we hope, to success, to victory. But we also have to be urged on. We have to be inspired by ideals. And to fight a war, to put back on the throne a regime that denies civil rights, that doesn't even make any attempt to move toward democracy is something that most Americans are repelled by.
Let's move a little broader now on the Middle East, and then I want to talk to you briefly also about the Soviet Union. You make the observation in your book, and you say that you have said it many times when you were President of the United States, that no president is ever going to desert Israel, right?
Correct. I put it more bluntly. I said, as I told congressional leaders during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no American president will let Israel go down the tube.
All right.
Democrat or Republican, it's not an issue.
That is stated fairly categorically, and yet in your book you make it clear at the same time that Israel really is not of any enormous strategic value to the United States anymore.
That's correct.
So why then would the United States continue to burden itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis, jeopardize possibly young American fighting men, when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the United States is concerned by more than strategic values. That's maybe a weakness, but it's the way we are. And there are moral issues involved here. We don't have an alliance with Israel, as you know. They're not an ally of the United States in the technical sense. But we have a bond to Israel that's much stronger. It's a moral commitment because of what happened during the Holocaust, and a moral commitment because it is a democracy, the only democracy in that area. And under the circumstances, that is why American presidents and the American people in the future will support all out the survival of Israel if it's attacked.
You've always been a very tough, pragmatic man. And I just wonder if you were the president of Israel and you heard Richard Nixon talking that way, or for that matter, heard any sitting American president talk that way, and say, but there's really no strategic value anymore, how much faith would you place in that kind of a moral commitment if push really came to shove?
If I were the president of Israel, I'd put a great deal of faith in it because of the track record of the United States, and also because he would know that that is the way the American people are. There is no doubt whatever of our commitment to Israel.
Although you referred, Mr. President, to the track record. The track record was established at a time when the Soviet Union tended to be allied with Israel's enemies, with the Arab world, and we're not worried about the Soviet Union anymore in that sense. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Therefore, haven't things changed appreciably in the Middle East, and then we'll use that to get into the Soviet Union?
Well, at the present time, we could be thankful for the fact that this is the best opportunity in 40 years to make the right kind of a deal in the Middle East, because the Soviet Union no longer is going to poison the deal as they would have previously and have in virtually every previous crisis that we've had. The Iraqis have been taken out of the play. The Egyptians were taken out by Camp David. The Saudis are now being at least not unhelpful. So under the circumstances, this is the time for Israel to make its deal. It also should make its deal now for another reason. Israel at the present time is the only nation in the area that has atomic weapons. Others are going to get them. Therefore, it's better for Israel to make the deal now rather than waiting till later. Because while Israel would be responsible insofar as the use of weapons are concerned, use them only in defense, some of the crazies out there might not be responsible. And that's why for Israel, for the United States, it's important for us to make this deal rather than waiting until later when they would be looking down our throats.
You state that categorically, that the Israelis have atomic weapons. You know they have never admitted it publicly. You stated, as a former president of the United States, you must know what you're talking about.
I'm not going to divulge any of my so-called secret information and so forth, but I will say this, that if I were an Israeli, I wouldn't indicate that I had them, and I wouldn't indicate that I didn't have them. But let me say, most experts in the area assume that they have them, and as long as they assume that, that's enough.
But you don't qualify...
Because the Israelis will use them.
You didn't qualify it here this evening, and you didn't qualify it in your book. You stated it categorically in your book also, and I'm sure you were very careful.
I believe, based on what I know, that that is the case.
All right, Mr. President, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the Soviet Union, or what was the Soviet Union, with former President Nixon.
They warned me. Buying a new car is a big financial responsibility. They said it would change my life. You know something? They were right.
Introducing the 1992 Toyota Tercel. Starting at $69.98, Tercel is the lowest priced two-door sedan you can buy.
Mom sent pictures. You're as big as a house.
Oh, you should see me.
Moments like this were made for Gold MasterCard. With the added credit you've earned.
That's a long way to Amaru. And you'll need the map.
Plus, no card is more welcomed at home or abroad. Not American Express, not even Visa.
Oh, Lori, I can't believe it. How in the world?
Gold MasterCard, the best gold card to master the moment.
Everyone knows Contact wrote the book on cold medicine. Now Contact's added a whole new chapter, introducing new Contact Day and Night. On this page, yellow day caplets that knock out your cold symptoms without making you drowsy, so you can breathe easy and work all day long. On this page, blue night caplets that relieve your symptoms to let you rest. Both formulas control your cold symptoms with the right medicine at the right time. New Contact Day and Night, a whole new chapter in cold relief.
In 1991, Channel 5 took an active role in our community. WOI-TV was proud to air the 1991 Variety Club Telethon. Thanks to your generous contributions, it was the most successful telethon to date. Channel 5 honored outstanding high school seniors at our 4th annual Iowa's Pride Day at Adventureland. For many years, Channel 5 has aired both the Visha and the State Fair parades. That tradition continued in 1991. With your help, our 5+ book drive collected over 12,000 books that were donated to needy families in central Iowa. And the 4th annual Keep a Kid Warm coat drive was the most successful ever, collecting nearly 4,000 coats. During the holiday season, Iowans responded to Channel 5's efforts by donating thousands of toys to our Toys for Tots drive. To be a leader in the community, you need to take an active role in it. With your help, Channel 5 will continue to do just that in 1992 and beyond.
And we're back once again with former President Richard Nixon. Mr. President, let's take a look at the Soviet Union. I must tell you, I read, you were kind enough to give me the galleys of your book before it was printed, and I was surprised at how perceptive you were with regard to Yeltsin versus Gorbachev. You, in effect, kissed Gorbachev off months ago.
Yes, the book was finished in September, and that's when I wrote Gorbachev off. And not because I wanted to, but because that was the fact.
Well, it wasn't just a matter of kissing him off, but you were quite critical of those in the administration who were being somewhat hesitant about giving Yeltsin his due.
Well, I think it's been a mistake to engage in Yeltsin bashing. I don't think he's the second coming. I don't think anybody is, as a matter of fact. But on the other hand, he has the power. He has repudiated communism. He is for the free market. He is going to adopt a foreign policy which is not aggressive. He's going to cut off all aid to Cuba and Afghanistan and these other losers in the third world. And anybody that does those things deserves the support of the United States. We should hope that he survives.
Do you think he will?
I think he will survive. I am more optimistic on that than many are. I think he will survive first because he believes in the right things. He is the only alternative. I think second, he will survive because he is a very strong leader. Third, he has a characteristic that every leader should have. He isn't afraid to have people smarter than he is around him. He has surrounded himself with very bright young people, and they have worked out his economic plans. Gorbachev, unfortunately, who was very bright himself, made a mistake. He was surrounded by what I would call first-rate, second-rate people, except possibly for Shevardnadze, who was first-rate in every respect.
What would you say is the biggest danger facing that entity which we used to call the Soviet Union, that new Commonwealth? Is it nationalism? Is it the ethnic divisions that have existed and have been essentially suppressed over the last 70-some-odd years? Is it the danger of nuclear proliferation, that is, of some of these weapons falling into other hands?
Nationalism is a danger, but it's one that I think that Yeltsin will be shrewd enough to handle. As far as nuclear proliferation is concerned, it isn't a question of the weapons proliferating. It's a question of the knowledge to make them proliferate. They're not going to take these weapons and cart them over to somebody else who won't know how to use them or to make them. And in that respect, you've got to find a way to improve the Russian economy so that they will stay home, and a way to work out joint ventures with the United States and other Western countries' scientists so that they will have a place to go. You want to remember, of course, that German scientists, Werner von Braun and others, helped us develop our missile capability. We don't want to have the Russian or Soviet scientists, who are very, very good in this area. They may be last in many other areas, but they're very good in this area. We don't want to have them ending up in places like Libya or Syria or other rogue states.
And how do you prevent that?
It is a difficult thing to do, but the point is to give them a better option. Give them a better option at home, improved conditions there, other activities for them to engage in, and better options in working with their compatriots abroad.
Well, I mean, when you talk about, you've got to give, who are you talking about? That the United States has to do that? That the United States has to be helpful?
The United States has to be helpful, not only in that respect, but also with regard to humanitarian aid, with regard to possible aid for the transition purposes and so forth. But we have to recognize that whereas right after the great victory in World War II, we had to do it alone because there was no one else to do it, that now, after the defeat of communism in 1991, there are others who should assume that burden more than we do. Those that we helped after World War II, the Germans have already done, for their own reasons, you know, have provided a considerable amount of help to the former Soviet Union. But the Japanese should pick up a lot of the tab.
A lot of Americans are saying, how can we afford to continue giving foreign aid around the world when things are going so badly in our own economy? People have a tendency to look upon foreign aid as being another variation of charity. You agree?
Totally not. If it were charity, then we wouldn't do it. Although we are a very generous people, as you know. Whenever there's an earthquake or a tragedy any place in the world, Americans pour out their hearts and their money as well. But on the other hand, as far as foreign aid is concerned, we're doing it for our own interests. It's very important at this time that Yeltsin not fail. Because as Russia goes, the rest of the former Soviet Union will also go.
As you look back now, and you've lived during an extraordinary period, and I hope you don't feel I'm giving away any secrets when I say you're going to be 79 later this week. As you look back now on your career, do you think we are better positioned today than we have ever been? Assess for me the possible dangers and the possible gains.
We still live in a very dangerous world because of the instability in the world. But that instability is preferable to what it was before. When you had stability with all the power in the Soviet Union in one source, that was a potential danger to the United States of great magnitude, because that was the only power in the world that could destroy the United States. Today, that power has been passed around to others, the Russians, Ukrainians. For example, the control of nuclear weapons, as you know, is now in the hands of four, the button so-called. It cannot be pushed unless four agree. That makes it a much safer world. I would say as far as the world generally is concerned, though, it's a much more hopeful world because of the march of democracy. When you stop to think that today, as Freedom House reported just last week, over half the countries in the world are now democracies or are on the way to becoming democracies, that's something new in the world. When you think that today we have a situation where freedom is on the march every place, communism has been discredited, socialism has been discredited, authoritarianism has been discredited. The people of the world know that freedom works. It works in the United States. It works in Western Europe. It works in Japan. And if we can help make it work in the former Soviet Union, then it means the victory will have been won. And it'll mean the next century can be a century of peace. It can be a century of progress. It can be a century of freedom. And that's something that's certainly worth Americans supporting, whether with foreign aid or any other facility we can use.
President Nixon, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Happy birthday, and I wish you good fortune with your new book and hope to have you back for your 80th.
Well, I hope I don't celebrate my 80th on television, because that's the time when you don't want to look back, you want to look forward and see what you're going to do with the rest of your life.
There you go. Thank you, sir. I'll be back in a moment.
What's gotten into my washer? Repairman!
Stand back, everybody. I've dealt with this before.
Mommy, it's me!
Quite a volcano you've got here, missus.
It's Repairman! Dad, do something! Repairman!
To the rescue!
If you're a lonely repairman who dreams of being a superhero, you better keep on dreaming, because Maytags are built to last longer and need fewer repairs.
Tomorrow on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, how can members of Congress who want to save jobs in their districts make significant cuts in the defense budget? That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a videocassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling. If you wish a printed transcript, please send $4 to 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203. This has been Nightline.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
TV Guide tells you why you shouldn't miss the return of Civil Wars. It's incredible. It's exactly the same formula he used in Hill Street Blues and L.A. Law. Good story, good writing, good casting, and good production values. I cared about the characters right away. Tomorrow at
Channel 5's Dennis Doda, keeping you in touch.
The odds and win, lovers they can't divide, making it side by side. Oh, love is fun. Now the two makes one. We can laugh and cry, love's a crazy ride when we're side by side, side by side.
Led Zeppelin is back. Digitally remastered. Jimmy Page has returned to the studio and digitally remastered all the classic tracks from Led Zeppelin. The greatest rock and roll band ever.
Let the sun beat down upon my face.
This boxed set is available now at your local music store on CDs or cassettes. And now, Time Warner offers you an exclusive 2-CD version of the Led Zeppelin remasters through this limited TV offer.
Baby, since I've been
It's 26 songs, more than 2 hours of classic rock and roll, and it's available now over the phone for 4 easy payments. Call this number and get Led Zeppelin as you've never heard them before. And it's not available in any store. Order now. You'll also get this free 30-minute interview with Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones.
I was really seduced by rock and roll at an early age, that's for sure. We first played together in a small room in Gerrard Street. The element of risk was the great thing about it.
Call now to get this exclusive TV offer. 2 remastered CDs or cassettes, plus the free interviews delivered to your home. This offer won't last long, so write this number down and call now.
to heaven.
I can't wait for you to tell Daddy the good news.
Oh, neither can I.